right? It describes the relationship between any price I might possibly charge you and how you respond. I want you to distinguish that from how you actually make decisions. So we introduced this concept of quantity demanded, right? That's just a scalar. I tell you what price, hey, well, it's $3. Tell me how much you want. Right? And so today's entire lecture is going to be getting you to think about the distinction between, right, the scalar and the spectrum. Right? How I make decisions across the entire range of prices versus the actual decision I do make. Okay? So before I do that, I wanted to remind you that while we're modeling individual behavior, in Econ 207 we'll optimize individual behavior for you. We're talking about markets for the rest of the class. So when we say what's going to happen to, I don't know, like the price of corn when the U.S. drops farm subsidies, or what's going to happen to the price of, what's going to happen to the processor market if we slap tariffs on China and so on. I'm actually asking you about what's going to happen in the market, right? Not any individual, I'm saying market. So how do we move from like individual demand to market demand? So suppose we have like burritos, right? You got like Mike's demand curve for burritos here, and like Rachel's demand curve for burritos here. What do these things tell you? They tell you at every possible price of a burrito, how many I want, right? And the way we move from the individual to a market is we just try to aggregate them by adding, okay? We add up every person's quantity demanded, right, horizontally to get to the market. So to get to the market demand curve, say, okay, if the price is 3, how many does Mike want? He wants 1. If the price is 3, how many does Rachel want? She wants 2. So if you add them up here, you get this horizontal sum of your demand curves. Okay? And so the market demand here, the market quantity demand is 3. So if you kind of do that through the whole range of demand here, what you see is I can have a description of how will everyone in the market respond to changes in prices. As the price of burritos falls, the entire market's going to increase their consumption of burritos from 3 to 6. Right? So that's where we get this from, and I'm not going to give you too much more commentary than the following. Notice something about the shape of market demand curves, or notice something about the shape of curves that are aggregated when I continue to add them up and add them up. And it's going to be germane to today's lecture. In your head, just note that this is flatter. And by the end of today, I want you to actually tell me what does that actually mean, and then after next week, you should be able to tell me what that means from a policy perspective. So just from an economic perspective, what does it mean? Okay? So anyway, we're gonna unless I say otherwise, we're talking about market supply and demand curves for the rest of the semester. And we really won't say anything about individual supply and demand curves. Alright, that's great. So last class we demonstrated the law of demand. Prices go up, you do less. Prices go down, you do more. Well, that's great. When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep. Well, do you sleep 12 hours a night? Or do you sleep 1 hour a night? When you're hungry, do you eat like 17 bowls of ice cream? Or do you eat 1 bowl of ice cream? What we actually care about is how much does our behavior change. It's one thing to say directionally, yeah, you're going to do more, you're going to do less. That doesn't tell you very much. Oh, I'm going to breathe in the morning. I don't know, am I breathing heavy? Am I breathing equally? I don't know. So in economics, we actually want to ask, generally, right, what sorts of things change our consumption? And then more importantly, we're going to spend the rest of the lecture saying, well, how do we know when those changes will be big? How do we know when those changes will be small? That's what we're doing. So what changes my behavior? Why is the law of demand hold? Why do I change my consumption? Right, we're going to do that to start. And then again, like how big are these changes going to be? And what is the importance of them? So let's just start here, right? We want to talk about, well, what sorts of things make me change my behavior? And we use like pedantic language in economics, not because you need it, but because we live in a world of 2 dimensions. So in an ideal world, when we're talking about economics, how do individuals make decisions? Really what I care about is the consumption function. Hey, like today it's raining out, and so I consumed an umbrella, right? So we can describe your consumption of umbrellas as a function of what? Well, the price of an umbrella mattered, right? The price was $1 million, I probably wouldn't have it. That was free, it was in my living room. If it was low, I'd have it. So the prices of the things matter. What else dictates whether I buy an umbrella? Well, how much money I have. If I'm feeling pretty good, I got a lot of money, I'll buy some more umbrellas. If I don't have a lot of money, I don't. What else matters? I don't know, the weather. What else matters? I don't know, like I was jealous. I actually like what he's wearing. I was telling Lex on the walk over here, I hate the umbrella. It's like dripping on us. It doesn't do much. My backpacking rain gear is way better. I'd rather just have my jacket on, So like maybe you just don't like carrying stuff. You like to drink your coffee. So that impacts whether you buy, taste. A whole bunch of stuff impacts whether I consume an umbrella. So if I was giving you a true theory of demand is, what are you consuming, right? I would just talk about all those things. But since I operate in 2 dimensions, I can only draw one of these things on the board. So we map out your consumption, how much umbrellas I want, or in this case, how much of electricity I want, and we plot it against prices. Therefore, we have to be very careful when I talk about what changes my consumption vis-a-vis the graphs. So what sorts of things change my consumption? We're going to sort your behavior into, okay, what happens when prices change, when umbrella prices change, versus what happens when anything else makes me want to change my behavior. So let's focus on this. This is the way we talk about the law of demand, right? So if the price of electricity changes, for example, suppose right now I'm buying 8 kilowatts hours of electricity per day, and the price of electricity is $1 an hour. And suppose we put a $2 per hour, tax on electricity. I don't know, or like, I don't know, every time I buy electricity, I have to make a donation of $2. What happens? Well, you move along your demand curve, you reduce your quantity demand. If you go from here 8 down to 4 here, right? When a price changes, remember our demand schedule. Your head has all this computer code that says, if price equals this, then I'll do that. So my point is, so if a price changes, you just highlight a different part of your computer code. You just say, go there, right? In other words, demand does not change when prices change. I want you to be very careful with your language here. Demand doesn't change because the price, this is how we mapped out the demand curve. It tells you how you will respond to every particular price. So if the price rises, you move over here. The analogy, I think, it kind of works the following way. When I put a pot of water on the stove and I have tap water and it's 70 degrees, right? And then I start applying heat, I turn the stove on, and the thing gets hotter, 90, 100, 110, 120. Right? When I apply heat to my water, it even starts boiling at 212. Does it change the relationship between heat and boiling point? No. It just changes the temperature I see. So that's what it is. When you see a price change, it doesn't change the relationship between prices and quantities. It just tells you what price you're going to be operating. Okay? And what quantity you're going to be operating. On the other hand, if I'm boiling water and I start adding pressure in the room, or taking pressure out of the room, then as I start adding heat, it's going to change the entire relationship between the heat input and when the thing boils. It actually changes the way it behaves, and that's a change in demand. So the point is, anytime a price changes, it's a change in quantity demanded. You're just moving along the curve. In your head, you've seen supply and demand in your recitations, and we're going to do this next week. But that's like when the supply curve shifting around, demand doesn't change, quantity demand changes. So imagine here, the supply curve shifts in, I'll show you later. The quantity demand falls. The supply curve shifts out, the quantity demand increases. And then we'll flip it when we do changes, okay? So that's it. And then, guys, okay, anything other than the price changes, but yet I still want to change my consumption, well, the whole demand curve shifts. And you have to be very careful about talking about movements along the demand curve versus shifts in the demand curve. So if this is my demand for electricity, and suppose today the price of electricity is $1 a kilowatt hour, you know what, and this is actually what I use in my house. I use 24 kilowatt hours a day in my house. I use about a kilowatt per hour, right? If suddenly someone invents this really cool electric car or an electric bike, what's going to happen? Like, regardless of the price, I'm going to want more electricity, not less. So even though the price of electricity yesterday was $1, it doesn't change, but now there's this cool thing I want to buy. It's an electric car. Boom, I want more electricity at any price. So the demand increases. Do you notice? At every possible price, you want more. So demand shifts out. If for something else happens, like, if you guys all read in the news that Celsius energy drinks cause hearts to explode, well, regardless of the price, the demand for Celsius drinks should probably decrease, but some of you weird college students would probably double down on it and drink more. So demand curves are shifting when something other than the price changes. That makes sense? Okay, so what are some of those things that are not prices that make demand curve shift? And I'm going to put 4 on here. The answer is there's an infinite number of things, right? And you read any news story, what you should be thinking about in your head is, hey, what does the demand curve look like for the thing they're talking about? What does the supply curve look like for the thing they're talking about? And what's changing? Income changing? I gotta blow through this. So if you have
Can we just like write any of these as basically demand surface by adding another dimension?
That's what I'm saying. Like, again, this is a general n-dimensional function, and ideally, I'd be able to plot. If I plotted the 3rd dimension, I could put income here and have the demand plane. But that's
the long demand is basically saying
level.
that one partial derivative is negative everywhere, right?
That's the law of demand. Okay, that's the law of demand. And of course, it could interact with other things. And in 207, I'll show you where that partial derivative comes from. So guys, we want to talk about some of the things that change my behavior. In no particular order, but I do in order I think is important. Sometimes how much money you have matters. Remember, your demand is a function of what you like, plus whether you can pay for it. So did you ever ask yourself the following question? Man, you're laying in bed. If I had enough money, I would do X. If I only had some more money. This is what I would do. I'd buy more tickets to the basketball games. I would go to a better college. I'd buy nicer beer. I would buy clothes that fit me, buy more hardcover books, right? And also, have you ever sat there in your head going, I had more money, man, I'd stop doing this shit. My first job was in New York City. Me and my roommate Simon shared a 350 square foot, 7-floor walk-up apartment. And we were both like, man, I can't wait to get a pay raise, right? We're gonna get out of this damn hellhole, right? So that's actually capturing the concept of what economists call normal and inferior goods. There are some goods for which, when you get more money, again, I'm saying nothing about prices. I'm talking about money, income. When I have more income, if you buy more stuff because you have more income, that whole demand curve will shift to the right. You'll get more of it regardless of the price. And then that's how we define a normal good. A normal good is a good for you for which the quantity demanded increases when your income goes up. Now, some goods are normal for me, may not be normal for you. Like for me, a hardcover book is a normal good. The richer I get, the more of those I buy. For me, travel outside the United States is probably a normal good. If I get a bonus, I travel outside the United States. Really good fresh fruits and vegetables. I go to Wegmans every day. I buy fancy stuff like free cut and all that. That's all normal goods. But what's normal for me may not be normal for you. Okay? On the other hand, there's some goods for which, when you get more income, paradoxically, you do less of it. College students are classic about this, right? You guys eat horribly. Like you're hungry, you're poor at night, you're like ordering the Dominator pizza with like extra sausage and pepperoni, and it's tasty. Don't get me wrong, right? Or like you eat. Like my son loves ramen noodles. I'm like, bro, someday you're not going to be eating those. But he eats them almost because they're cheap. And like, okay, when I make more money, when I get my job, I'm going to order something better, right? I'm not going to have ramen noodles. I'm not going to eat hot dogs. I'm not going to buy these used, soft cover books. Well, we call those goods inferior. Inferior. An inferior good is defined by how you behave. There's no objectively inferior good. If I ask you an exam question that says, are hot dogs an inferior good? You should just write a big giant question mark as your answer. I don't know. Like when I make more money, I get more hot dogs. I love hot dogs. I eat them all the time. For you, you might hate them. The only reason you have them now is cheap meat, like sausage in a can. Right? So an inferior good is a good for which your consumption falls when you're doing better. Now, ironically, what we actually start seeing is economists will sort of track the consumption of goods over time. And if we start seeing the consumption of inferior goods going up, we start thinking that like the economy is about to tank, right? So people start taking like visits to the free public library. People start going to like national parks instead of traveling around the world. People start buying used books on Amazon instead of new books on Amazon. And without knowing we're in a recession, that might tell you, man, we're screwed. So that's kind of a good thing you do as an economist. You kind of use that to your advantage. Okay, so that's income. I'm going to come back to that. Okay, the second thing, the big classic categories that changes is, well, sometimes the prices of other stuff matter. Again, why do you buy stuff? You buy stuff because you think it's the best option to satisfy your economic need, right? So the reason I bought a space heater is that my daughter is freezing in her bedroom. So I got a space heater because I was out of blankets, But the price of blankets, for example, will dictate whether or not I buy a space heater. It's often the prices of other things. The price of seltzer or coffee dictates whether or not your idiot professor buys zero sugar, mango, Pepsi. Right? Yeah. Okay, so what do we mean by this? Well, there are some goods that you might think are replacements for one another. That's not the right way to do it. But for goods that are substitutes, we see the following. Suppose this is actually the market for DVDs. Right? We'll call this DVDs. These two pictures. And what impacts how many DVDs you buy? Obviously the price of DVDs. DVDs are cheap, you buy a lot. Of DVDs are expensive, you don't buy. But imagine the price of DVDs has been stuck at $10 forever. It's always been $10. I'm sorry, I'm old. You don't know what a DVD is. It's a disc-like product that you put into a machine that plays movies. And at the time when they came out, I was like, this is groovy. This is like way better than the VHSs that I was replacing. I still have a lot of legacy DVDs in my house, and they don't play on my laptop anymore. This is like really upsetting to me. Anyway, DVD. Okay. What other than the price of a DVD might impact whether I buy it? Well, you might say movie prices or Netflix prices, right? So what happens to my consumption of DVDs if movie prices go up? Because I'm supposed to go see Wicked this weekend. I definitely don't want to, and I'm hoping that like the tickets sell out. But my lady friend's like, we're going.
I heard it's really good.
She liked the book. I don't know. Yeah. So, all right. The price of Wicked goes to $98 tonight. What am I going to do? Probably maybe buy Wicked when it comes out later on. So you might say a substitute good is one for which, when the price of an alternative goes up, you buy more of this one. Right? So So maybe movies and DVDs, maybe Netflix and DVDs. That's not true for everybody. Actually, for me, I use movie theaters as an entree into like whether I want to buy the DVD. So paradoxically, if a movie's cheaper, I go to more movies. I end up buying more DVDs because it tells me, oh, I really like that one. I want to get it again. But for most people, movies and DVDs are substitutes. You use one or the other. Right? There's a different relationship, right? Think about the market for DVDs in terms of something else that goes with it. Now, we call economic goods complements when the following happens. When you treat the price of the other thing no differently than you treat the price of this thing. So like, I'm an adult, like, you probably see me walking around my coffee. I put French vanilla creamer in it all the time. So, yes, if the price of coffee goes up, I buy less coffee. But since I need to have creamer in my coffee, if the price of creamer goes up but coffee doesn't change, I still buy less coffee. Because I need creamer, so if the price of creamer goes up, it's as if my drink got more expensive, right? So we define complements that way, right? So a complementary good is one for which when its price goes up, the consumption of the other good falls. So DVDs and DVD players, right? The DVD player gets expensive, you're likely to consume fewer discs themselves because you need the whole thing to go together. So complements are goods that tend to go together, but it doesn't have to be physically goods that go together. They can be goods that, for some reason, you just treat them as needing to go together. And then, again, like for my friend, like one of my friends, you might think Mountain Dew and coffee are substitutes if you need a hot drink, if you need a caffeine boost. My college roommate, nicest guy ever, used to mix them. Yeah, so for us, all about, for you, it's a substitute, right? If Mountain Dew gets more expensive, you substitute it to coffee. No, he substituted it away because he mixed it. That was before Boost and Celsius and all this shit. So he was an innovator, my friend. Yeah. But my point is, we define these things not as absolutes. Remember, everything in economics is subjective. It depends on what you do. So I look at your behavior and say, that must be a substitute for you. I look at your behavior, that must be complementary for you. That's why policy is difficult, right? Hot dogs are neither inferior nor normal, right? DVDs and DVD players are neither substitutes nor complements. It depends on how you use them. If you're an artist, maybe they're substitutes. If you're a movie aficionado, maybe they're complements, right? Like, it depends on who you are. Okay, some other stuff matters too. Obviously, if you wake up tomorrow and your preferences change, the whole relationship's going to change. If you woke up tomorrow and said, DVDs are stupid. Stupid people watch DVDs. Well, shit, then no one's going to, right? The whole demand curve will just shift in. Remember, I keep talking about diets. Like, every 6 months is a new diet. And my friends, like, it's one thing to have it. All my friends are like, you gotta try this one. You care about it. I don't care. So, like, the Atkins diet. When the Atkins diet starts, the demand for, like, wheat went to the floor, right? Nobody ate wheat and rice anymore, right? Atkins, you eat meat all the time. And then, again, in the 1980s, my mother was worried about fat because some studies said fat is bad for you. So my brothers and I all got pasta shoved down our throats for 10 years. So the demand for macaroni went through the roof, right? Like, how about this? Rizzo's got really groovy old man shoes on today. These are my father-in-law bought these, didn't want them, and gives them to me, and I'm dumb enough to put them on. This guy's 87. I'm wearing old man New Balance, because it's raining, I didn't want to wear good shoes. Yeah, but what if you're like, that's cool, it's Professor Sheep, and now all of you guys just run out to the store and buy New Balance. So, independent of whether the price is expensive or not, you just buy it. So tastes obviously change, and that's the fun part. Like, it's hard to predict taste changing. And then most importantly, expectations matter. So nothing real has to change for demand to change. Right? If you think any one of these other things is going to change, you will change your behavior today. So for example, suppose we're talking about, I don't know, the demand for gasoline, right? You care about what the price of gasoline is right now, yes, and I got 16 gallons in my car, but you also care about what you think the price of gasoline is going to be in the future. Suppose you think the price of this good, gas, is going to go up tomorrow or a week from now. What might you do right now? Well, I mean, you don't have to, but gas is effectively cheaper now than it's going to be in the future, so at the moment, at its current price, you might go out and get more. So even though it's still $3, if I expect it to go to 4 or 5 tomorrow, you go get more today. That's why in New York City, my grandma used to, every time we were told there was a drought coming, she'd fill up her bathtub. So even though the drought wasn't there yet, she would fill up her bathtub. But what does that actually cause? The drought to happen. Yeah, so for fun on your notepads, just draw yourself both the supply and demand curve. I know I haven't taught it both yet. See what happens to the market if you think prices are going to go up. Just put the supply and demand curve together. And I say, if you think prices are going to go up, you're going to buy more now. So what are you going to cause to happen? You actually make the prices go up. It's so hilarious. Okay, so expectations. And here we talked about this in another class. If you think prices are going to fall, so I'm an employer, and right now the wage I have to pay a worker is $50, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay that. I'm greedy. If you think tomorrow or the year after the wages are going to fall, what do? You wait. Right? I wait to hire you until the wage is lower, and then I pay you that lower wage. But paradoxically, what does that do? It causes wages to fall now. Right? So expectations about price changes are really important. Right? But guys, and I'm not going to go through the rest of it. Right? Expectations about any of these things will also shift your demand curve today. So just one more example quick. When I was a grad student, my last year of grad school, I made $18,000 between my stipend and I worked on a golf range, and I got some health care. When I was making $18,000, I went and bought a $270,000 house. What? I did not have the money. I couldn't. I borrowed it all. I didn't have the money. So why the hell did I do that? Well, the same reason you're also here. I just got my job offer, and I knew in 6 months I'd actually have money. So long before I started getting paid, I went back and bought myself a house because I knew I would be able to pay it off in the future. So expectations about future income are no different than if you think your income's up today, right? And so you do that all, that's for a normal good. Some of you will stop buying cheap ramen today if you think you're gonna get a job. All of you guys are in college, right? You think right now you're gonna make a lot of money when you graduate. So what are you doing now? You're buying a college degree. You don't have the money, most of you are borrowing it, right? You're doing exactly that. You're operating on an expectation. So think about how your behavior would change if you expect the price of a compliment to change, or a substitute, or if you expect people's tastes to change, or you expect policy to happen. What if you think we're going to get climate change legislation next year and you're a business person? What if college costs are going to go down in 5 years and you're a student? Like, think about how your behavior is going to change in all those scenarios. And that's why policy making is very, very difficult. Okay, that's demand shifters. That's great. So now we know it moves curves around. And again, go to the TA office hours. They've been offering supply-demand help all year. Next week and the weeks after, I'll be doing supply and demand for you. But now when you know what sorts of things shift demand curves around, it's really good to start practicing. You read any article, guys, identify who's being talked about, so you identify the agent, and then identify what's changing for them. And just in your head, think about what's happening to the demand curve. It may be shifting around, but it may be doing this next. All right, so the key thing is, yeah, it's great, law of demand. Prices go up, I buy less. Great. Prices go down, I buy more. Or, prices of substitutes go up, I buy more. Prices of complements go up, I buy less. Okay, great. But that doesn't mean anything unless I tell you how much more. So we actually care about how sensitive you are. Any of you have sensitive friends? Yeah, it's me. I'm that guy. Yeah, I have very thin skin, right? Like if you say something mean about me, like I definitely get fired. Like I definitely do. So I'm very sensitive to mean, nasty comments from my students. And then you probably have professors who give no fuck, no shit's given. Those people are not sensitive. Well, at least outwardly, they probably go home and eat. Don't kid yourself. But those are, and you say they're insensitive. They're not very responsive to the flack that they get. So people like me are very responsive. Look, I felt guilty now. I come to class a little bit early. I mean, maybe just the guilt, whatever you operate doesn't matter. The guilt works, right? I have Italian grandparents, so guilt works very, very well on me. So I'm responsive. The same concept applies in economics. If some change makes you really change your behavior, we say your demand is elastic. I hate the word elasticity. You don't ever have to use it in your career. You'll see it in textbooks. You'll see it written in articles. But it means you care a lot. It means you do a lot. You move a lot. If I threw a rubber ball at you, it would bounce back a lot, right? That's an elastic response, a sensitive to response. If I threw a brick at you, it would probably stick in you. It's a painful response, but it's not an elastic response. It's an inelastic. It will just stop when it hits you. And the same thing applies in economics. So we actually care about how much your quantities demands change when other things change. Really important. That's more important than even law. All right. The most important elasticity we talk about is how sensitive you are to your own price changing. So we talk about this thing called the own price elasticity of demand. Right? We basically say, listen, it's the percentage change in quantity demanded, right, divided by the percentage change in your price. Now, if I ask you, what happens to your consumption of Natty Light when Natty Light goes from $4 to $8? Price goes to zero. Right? The only reason you guys drink Natty Light, or no, you drink Jenny Light, you should from ours. The only reason you drink Jenny Light is why? Because it's cheap, right? And so you would just stop buying none of it. You would just buy like cereal box, right? What would happen to your consumption of water if water prices went from 1 to 2? Nothing. You keep drinking your water, right? So your demand for Natty Light, your demand for shitty beer, very elastic. Your demand for water, very inelastic. Now, as I go through my lecture, and maybe in your notes, you might want to write down, like, well, why is the demand for natty light sensitive to its price? Why is the demand for water not sensitive to its price? As you do that, either way, this is how we define it. Elasticity is this unitless concept. We basically compare, hey, the price changes by some amount, we look at how much your consumption changes. So, for example, right, suppose I have, I don't know, electricity, I have burritos, and initially this is my consumption bundle, right? A price is $1.50, and I consume 6 units of a good. And suppose something happens that makes my electricity price go from $1.50 to $2. What does that mean? Well, what's the percentage change here? The percentage change in price here, it's a 33% increase. You can't see that, but that's a 1/3. And let's look at my consumption. I initially was consuming 6, and now I consume 2. So that's a difference in 4. So that's a 2/3 decrease. I'm going to drop the minus sign. And you're going to see here, my elasticity of demand for electricity here is 2. Right? What the hell does that mean? Well, notice first it's a unitless concept. Economists came up with the idea of elasticity, so I can talk about your preferences for beer versus schooling versus healthcare in a way that's consistent. So I can actually say, well, you are more sensitive to the price of onions than you are to the price of schooling. Or you are more sensitive to the price of a movie ticket than you are to Netflix, right? By using unitless concepts, we've given a way to compare how we feel about different things. So elasticities have no units. This the size of the number matters. So what does this thing tell me? Suppose this elasticity is 2. Well, what that means is, and we'll have this here, it means my demand here is elastic. At this price, my demand's elastic. It means when prices change by a little bit, my consumption changes by a lot. Very responsive. I care a lot. I care a lot. Wow, it makes me hurt. So I want you to think about it in terms of like what it means from like a verbal standpoint. If you went to home over Thanksgiving break and your mom asked you, like, what'd you learn this week? Well, I learned about the elasticity of demand for sweet potatoes. I learned that it was 3. What does that mean? Well, you could say the following. It says, yeah, we really care about sweet potato prices. Well, what does that mean? Well, you might say, well, Mom, imagine sweet potato prices went up by 10%. We would reduce our consumption by 30%. Or you might say, Mom, imagine sweet potato prices doubled. That means we would actually see sweet potato consumption decrease by 300%. What if sweet potato prices fell by 50%? Oh, well, our consumption would increase by 150%. That just tells you how much more I consume when the price changes. We partition this into different units. So, for example, if that number is bigger than 1, we say you're sensitive. And if that number is less than 1, can't be negative. If that number is less than 1, right, we say you're not sensitive. And we'll go through some more of that in a minute, right? And before I get to that, like, we can talk about elasticities, we can talk about sensitivities in terms of anything else that might impact you, right? I can talk about, like, think about my demand for ice cream. Like, the price elasticity of demand for ice cream is probably pretty high. It's probably like 2 or 2.5, right? If ice cream was $100 a cone, no one would eat it. If ice cream was 50 cents a cone, we'd have a huge obesity epidemic on our hands, right? We love ice cream, we love the sugar, right? But other things impact your consumption of ice cream. How about this? We can define something like the temperature elasticity of demand for ice cream. And how would I come up with that? Percentage change in your quantity of ice cream divided by my percentage change in temperature.
That's no longer a unitless constant, though.
And everything else is constant. So like imagine you had a world where it's minus 10 degrees out. You're not going to have any ice cream. And as the temperature goes up by 10% or 20%, you start having more, right?
Yeah, but now you have unitless.
And then at some point it flips. At 90 degrees, actually it's at 80. The optimal temperature for ice cream peaks at 80. And then if it gets hotter than that, what's the problem with your ice cream? I mean, it's really good to eat, but it starts melting too fast in your hands. So it's an optimal temperature. So my point is, you can talk about elasticities with regard to anything. It's a unitless, generalized concept. And I like it. Really fun. So we can do cross-price elasticity, income elasticity, and so on. This is talking about some of the Pac-Man stuff, right? Why is environmental quality improved as we get richer? Because the income elasticity of demand for environmental quality is being, right? The richer I get, the more I spend on it. Again, I have more time to spend on it. I wish I had more time. Okay. All right, that's great. Okay, so sometimes we really care, sometimes we don't. Well, when do we really care? Like, what can I look at a person? Can I look at a group of people? Can I look at a type of series of goods and figure out when prices matter and figure out when they don't? And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, where do you want to be selling? Do you want to be selling in markets where people care about your pricing? Or do you want to be selling in markets where they don't? It's not quite clear. Right? But this is important. So in order to do that, well, obviously this should be obvious, right? Think about time. Basically, the more time I have to make a decision, the better able I am to make a decision. Think about it. Imagine I gave you an exam question. I said right now, We put a price ceiling in a market that also has a subsidy name. What happens to equilibrium? You have 6 seconds to answer. You're not going to answer, right? Okay, you have 6 minutes to answer. Quick, you ask your friend. You have 6 hours to answer. Now you go to the textbook, you go back to your notes, you search for it, you probably get the right answer. Yeah, ChatGPT, it'll get that right. Right? So the more time you have to answer my econ question, the better able you are to answer my econ question, right? Or if someone asks you, want to go on a date? Tell me right now! You probably make a bad choice. I don't know how to say no. One of you was telling me that before. I can't say no. You guys put me on the spot. No, of course, yes. Then you regret it. Shit. So you tend to make better decisions when you have more time. Not always. Right? You tend to make better decisions when you have more time. Same thing with the market. The more time you have to respond to a price change, the more you will respond to a price change. So suppose gasoline goes from $3 to $4 tonight. Right? How much will my consumption fall tomorrow versus how much will my consumption fall in a year? Well, obviously tomorrow I'll consume a little bit less. But look, what could I possibly do to consume less? I still have to go to school, right? I'm not going to quit my job tomorrow because gas is a little more expensive. So I'm still going to drive to school. And think about some of the other things I can do to protect myself from that price change. Maybe get a more fuel-efficient car. Well, the car dealership's closed tomorrow. You know, so at least I have to wait till Monday, you know? Or maybe I have to move closer to the city so I don't have to drive as much. Maybe I keep my house a little bit more cooler. Or maybe I carpool with somebody. The thing about it is, the more time I have to do any of those things, the more easy it is for me to do it. So in a month, yeah, I probably can find someone to carpool with. In a year, I can probably afford a different car. You know, in 2 years, I can probably get a job that's in a different city that doesn't require me to drive. But in the short run, I can't really change my behavior, so I don't. But here's the kicker. For you to respond to a price change on your own, suppose coffee gets expensive and you want to substitute the tea or you want to substitute the energy drinks. Someone on the supply side also has to be changing their behavior. So back when I moved to Rochester, I tried to buy a second car and I wanted the Toyota Prius. I go proudly walking down to the Toyota store. I'm like, here, down payment, here it is. They're like, dude, 2 years. They just had such a production backlog. And when I started my job here, gas prices spiked like $4.20. And I was like, really wanted a fuel efficient car. But so did everyone else and their brother. They couldn't tool up their factories fast enough. So in a matter of a week or a month, right, they can't produce enough cars. But if you give Toyota 2 years, yeah, the car will be there. Right? Similarly, you want to have this energy transition happen in our economy? Well, all the things that now currently use gasoline, like my snowblower and all that stuff, we have to make them use electricity. Or like, how do you make cement without using fossil fuels? It's hard, right? So even though like the price of fossil fuels might go up, you might want to substitute away from cement. You can't. The rest of the economy has to catch up. The point is, more time means you can do it. Okay? So time matters a great deal. Next, we'll spend more time on this in 207. Well, how important the thing is matters. So when the price of toothpick doubles, I give no shits. I just keep buying them. Why? I don't even know how often I buy them, but like toothpicks cost $1, and I make $100,000. Toothpicks don't mean anything to me in my budget. The price of cars doubles? I really am sensitive. Alright, so toothpick prices can fluctuate quite a big deal, and I'm just going to buy them, because they never make me poor, right? In other words, if something's not important in your budget, when prices change, that income effect we had talked about is not going to be very big, so it doesn't hurt you so much. When something's really big, like college education, your guys' tuition, if the price of college doubled or tripled, like that's really going to change your behavior, because it's a big financial kick to your budget. So budget shares matter, and guys, once again, this is why I keep telling you, like the economic policymakers have to be very attuned to the impact of their policies on poor people, and because this is actually a fact, this is math. Anything poor people buy is a bigger share of their budget than what rich people buy. So when you increase the price of anything, it's going to impact poor people more than wealthier people. And so they're going to be much more sensitive to those price changes than we are. Okay? And that's why there's a lot of pushback on climate policy. There might not be any climate deniers out there, but if things get expensive, it makes it really hard for poor. Alright, last thing, of course, this makes sense. This whole lecture is spoons or not spoons. So was the last lecture, and actually so was the one after this. Okay? But spoons aren't spoons. When we talk about the shape of a demand curve, we're just asking, do you have options? Steep demand curves, inelastic demand curves, when this number's no, you have no options, you gotta do it. So demand curves will be flat. Elasticities will be high. Your behavior will change a lot. And then you can change your behavior a lot. And that's really dictated by the availability of substitutes. Now that's weird. Like, you might say, yeah, if the price of coffee goes up, so long as there's other substitutes like tea and soda, that means I'll be very responsive to a coffee price change. But you have to understand why I'm drinking coffee. The reason I drink coffee is I need something to hold. The reason I drink coffee is this is part of my morning routine. So for me, my demand for coffee is probably more elastic than yours. Because I have more substitutes. Like, I could just choose another drink. But like, if coffee gets expensive, I don't need another drink. I have just need something to play with. I put a hat on, play with my ears, and sing songs, So it depends on who you are, right? There'll be and by the way, just so you know, the more broadly I define a good, the fewer substitutes there are, right? How many substitutes are there for a red Toyota minivan? Well, lots. Blue Toyota minivans, Honda minivans, electric cars, bicycles, trains, buses, right? And then you start generalizing. How many substitutes are there for cars? Well, shit, planes. How many substitutes are there for transportation? Oh, not much, right? So the demand for movement is much more inelastic than the demand for driving in a blue Toyota Sienna minivan. Right? And that's very important, again, for policymakers. This is the crux we were talking with Sim about, like, monopoly policymaking. Why do we care about Chrome? Are there substitutes or they're not? And what function is it serving? And it doesn't mean if they're substitutes now, or they're substitutes possibly in the future from ways that we can't quite envision, right? So we used to think like wired internet was a monopoly, but it's not. Most of us, over 50% of us get internet not wired now. And that was the whole debate about like net neutrality. Should the government regulate whether an internet service provider can throttle content? Well, now you don't need to be plugged in. So it's a different question. So this is the crux of monopoly theory. The whole course of industrial organization starts here. And I'm just so frustrated because I only get 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, it's so much fun stuff. Then I move on. All right, that's elasticity. Moving on, you might actually see people talk about elasticity in all kinds of paradoxical ways. You might hear people say something like the following. Hey, Rizzo said this law of demand thing's like a law. Hey, Rizzo said if I can find a violation of law of demand, I might get an A. And a lot of people come to me and they're like, Rizzo, I bought salt last week. Shit, the price of salt could double. I'm still going to buy it. Doesn't that violate your damn law of demand? Didn't you say when the price of salt doubles, I should buy less? Take a whole bunch of I'm like an alcoholic. So price of Sierra Nevada, Sierra Nevada celebration last year was $11.49 for a 6-pack. This year $14.49. Still bought it. Back in what too? Doesn't that violate the law of demand? Sounds like it. But what did I urge you last class? I said, listen, before you think you found something that violates the law of demand, ask, how is this actually consistent with it? Right? So think about things like salt or aglets. The little things on the end of your shoelaces, the little aglets. Right? If aglet prices triple, you guys would probably still buy the same amount of aglets, right? No doubt. No, it wouldn't literally move the needle at all. So doesn't that seem to be in violation? And the answer is it's not. First, tell yourself what the law of demand says. The law of demand says, right, over the range of all possible prices, right, my consumption will fall when prices go up. So yeah, maybe when aglets are a cent a year, or 2 cents a year, or 3 cents a year, and they double, your consumption's not going to change. But what if aglets went to $10 million a year? Or salt? Yeah, when salt goes from 3 to 6. Or Sierra Nevada, for me, went from 11 to 14. Yeah, over that range of consumption, yeah, my demand is inelastic. I'm not changing it. But I'll tell you what, I'm not buying more. And if Sierra Nevada went to $148 million a can, well, ceteris paribus, everything else equal, yeah, I'm not going to buy it at all. The law of demand unfolds over all prices, and that's super important. Secondly, we actually have these mistakes we make in markets all the time. And one of the most common mistakes we make in markets is to think that you're the only person in it. A colloquial way of putting it is like we always ignore the suppliers. So are you the only person who consumes salt? So maybe even for you, the law of demand is completely inelastic demand, right? You always buy 1 gallon of salt a year. But you know what? There are other users of salt that use it in enormous quantities. There are other users of aglets who use it in enormous quantities. Shoe suppliers. Anyone making shoelaces is not spending 5 cents a year on aglets. They're spending $5 million a year on aglets. And a very small change in price for them is going to dictate a huge change in behavior. Similarly, salt. I lived in Kentucky. There was a bakery that made salt bread. So it's a bread product that uses an enormous amount of salt. Anybody from the southern tier or central, by Binghamton area, they have these like chicken speedy barbecues. But when you know what goes along with chicken speedy barbecue? Salt potatoes. They take potatoes and put buckets and buckets of salt in them, right? Those restaurants use it a lot. I was going to say last time, but I just said it last time, so I should have just said it the first time. They use a lot of salt. So yeah, well, for you, it makes up a small piece of your budget. For some other demanders, who happen to be suppliers, but it's a big piece of their budget. You're not going to forget them, right? So you got to remember that. So be careful when you sort of think you found a violation of the law of demand. All right, what other stuff matters? I have a few other things. I'm going to give you the extra 5 minutes. What other things matters? Suppose I want to ask you, from a graphical perspective, how do you depict elasticity? What does that look like? Well, again, this isn't always true. You have to know the units I'm talking about, right? In other words, we calculate elasticities this way, right? This way. You compare the percentage change in prices with the percentage change in quantities. That's what's true. But if you look at a picture and these units are the same, right? The quantities
Is
are
it
the same.
percentage change or the actual direct change?
Percentage, and it's got the percentage, and you'll see here y, right? And you see here the average, the y-axis is in exactly the same units. If you compare the demand curves for two different people on the same dimensions, what can you say? Well, suppose this is Alexa over here. This is Alexa's demand for coffee. This is Mike's demand for coffee. Well, for Alexa, her demand is more elastic. I'm not going to say it's elastic. It could be inelastic here. It's just more elastic. In other words, her demand curve is flatter. And we'll say that in a minute. And then for Mike, you would say his demand for coffee is more inelastic. You'll hear people say, you'll hear economists say it all the time, the demand curve is steep, right? Less sensitive to price changes. And the way you can see that is that take the same price change. Suppose coffee goes from $1 to $2, and I simulate them on both demand curves. And for Alexa, her consumption falls by this big yellow difference a lot. That same price change for Mike, look, he's only going to change his consumption by a little bit. So if you need a mnemonic, right, a steep demand curve looks like the letter I inelastic, study it, it's dumb, but if you want to, right? So this number is going to be, closer to 0, and this number is going to be further from 0, right? And that's how you do it. What else can you learn by thinking about elasticity? And I kind of wanted to, let me go in here and then I'll come back to total receipts. All right, so suppose we're talking about the shapes of demand curves, and you understand what we've been talking about today. I don't know. Is this sort of thing possible? In other words, can you have a perfectly inelastic demand curve?
Yes.
And the answer is no. Right? It's the land of the unicorn. Like you can have perfectly elastic supply curves, and you'll see that in the handouts I give you this weekend. But you absolutely cannot. And rather than answering my questions, what is my advice to those of you who come to me and ask for help about how you study? And I say, listen, don't answer my questions. Try to write my questions back. And I just asked you, is it possible for there to be a perfectly vertical demand curve?
Yes.
And
For
you
one
want
that
to
doesn't
write down,
exist, it's always 0.
you want to write down what I just asked you. The demand curve says, at every price, how much am I consuming? So what I'm asking you, is it possible that you consume the same amount regardless of its price?
Yes.
And once you put it that way, the answer has to be no. Because demand is a function both of what you like and of what you can afford. So here, how about this? Is the demand for someone who has diabetes, is the demand for insulin perfectly inelastic? And the answer is not even for them, because there are always substitutes. Plus, we'll go to the income part for a minute. There are always substitutes. So if insulin's really cheap, of course you'll use it. If insulin got a little bit more expensive and your diabetes isn't bad, for example, your doctor probably tells you, change your diet, change your exercise, let's come back, let's do some things, holistic health measures. And then if you're my parents who don't believe in modern medicine, unbelievable, if they ever got diabetes, you know what they'd say? It's a big cabal by big pharma to poison me, and they'll just start praying more. They say the rosaries every day. They'll say 2 rosaries. And you laugh, right? For some people, prayer is a substitute. And if I got stage 4 cancer, I'm not getting treated. So for me, if I got stage 4 cancer, I'm not getting chemo. I know, my kids know it. I wrote a thing out, but it's not happening. I'm just gonna go with grace. Remind me when I'm getting chemo that I said this, right? It's easy to say now. But seriously, so my point is, even for me, right? There's some point where I walk away. Secondly, even if you have a lot of income, you don't care about other stuff. You know what my ex-wife does for a living? She kills people. She literally kills people for a living. She works in the cardiac intensive care unit. She has very, very wealthy people who choose to take their family members off of life support. So even for them, you walk away at some point. The price is too high. So it can't be. And just another way to think about whether, in fact, you can have a perfectly inelastic demand curve is to think about the 2 following scenarios. One is, how about you? Suppose you have diabetes and you have insulin, and some idiot like Scully, corners the market and starts charging $6,000 a month for insulin. Well, suppose the price starts to fall, $5,000, $4,000, $3,000, $2,000, $10, $1. Do you think more people are going to fill prescriptions in that world? And you all going to say yes. If insulin prices got cheaper, more people would fill it. Therefore, the demand curve has slowed. You just proved it. Similarly, why didn't you have penicillin in 1850? It was because the cost was infinite. It wasn't because we couldn't get it. The price was infinity. And when the price was infinity, none of you took penicillin. Now, all of you get sick, you take amoxicillin. So the price of penicillin has fallen, and more of you are filling the prescription. Next, right? Next, again, maybe I'll throw this part in for them later. But I need 5 more minutes. The last thing to think about this is, I used to get yelled at all the time when I did radio shows. And I did a call-in show once, and this woman just had a bee in her bonnet about American healthcare. She knows I'm kind of a market-oriented guy, and the conversation got to coming around with, well, I know you're going to say we should have more market incentives in healthcare so that people don't overconsume it, and so that we have more supply, and blah, 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 blah. And she goes, but healthcare is just different. As soon as you say healthcare is just different, you don't have an argument. Right? You literally don't have an argument. Oh, you're just different. You're a dick. You're an asshole. You're short. You're ugly. Like, that's all I comment, right? Tell me why. Oh, she goes, healthcare is just different because, two things. Imagine you broke your leg and you had to negotiate with the surgeon in the emergency room to fix you. He can charge you any price he wants. You can't expect people to do that. So she said, in a spot market, markets won't work. And then the second thing she said was, and I can address the first if you want. There's something easy to say about that, and I won't respond. The second thing she said really got to be in my mind. She goes, well, healthcare is just too important. People will spend anything on their healthcare, and as a result, we're always going to get massively overcharged. And I says, are you sure you want to say that? Yes, sir. Okay, well, I asked two questions then. It says, so what you're saying is I can't afford healthcare myself because I'm going to pay anything, and the insurance companies and the government's going to pay. Is that right? And then you say my neighbor Joe can't afford their healthcare either? So how she was trying to argue for socialized healthcare. So how, if I can't afford it and you can't afford it and she can't afford it, how can 340 million people afford it if we just split the bill? If it's not affordable for one of us, it's definitely not affordable for all of us. That argument just fails on its face. But that was not the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make is in reference to this. She said, people will spend anything for their health care. And I said, ma'am, excuse me, do you have any children? Oh, proudly, I have 4, Mary, Johnny, Joey, Timmy. I said, ma'am, when are they born? Oh, 1940s. I said, you've just disproven your point. And in fact, insofar as you've ever had children, insofar as you've ever had unprotected sex, ma'am, have you ever driven a car? Ma'am, have you ever ridden a roller coaster? Ma'am, have you ever had a hamburger? Do you ever have an ice cream cone? She said, absolutely, all those things. I said, as long as you said that, then you just proved to me that life is not infinitely precious. Each and every time you step out the door, you're actually spending some resources, right, to enjoy yourself. And you're telling me your life is not infinitely valuable. If your life was infinitely valuable and you would pay anything, I would pay any price to get healed, well then you wouldn't eat ice cream, because that's a price. You're willing to actually eat the ice cream. Right? To say your health is all that matters is I would always get the ice cream. If your health is all that matters, you would never have sex. Because 20 million infectious diseases happen every single year because you guys have sex. Who wants that? And women, sorry, birth is not easy, and you used to die all the time. And ma'am, you had babies, you had 4 in the 1940s when we had no hospital. Right? You definitely risk dying for doing that. So each and every time you do it, you totally disprove the premise of your statement. And so there's always a demand curve sloping down. Is it fair? No, I don't know. All right, I beg you to stay until the 20, and then please, if you want to walk out, that's fine. The last thing you get from thinking about elasticities is what I wrote on this board. But this is kind of like the meat and potatoes of what you do as a policy economist. Right? What? Yeah, no, there's tons of jobs for economists, but mostly what you're doing is estimating demand curves, and then there's shaping. I used to do admissions consulting for not just the U of R, and I used to do financial aid consulting, not just the U of R, but all your competitors. And I can tell you what, the U of R is always trying to figure out what your demand curve for their product looks like. That's all we ever did. I can even show you the models. And so I used to simulate. Well, if I take away a little bit of financial aid, they still gonna come. If I give you a little bit more financial aid, you gonna come? Right? We're trying to figure out at the margin who's gonna come, who's not. Why? You wanna maximize revenue. Customers have to know how much they're spending on goods, and you probably wanna know, man, I'm gonna buy this house if my if the electricity price is double, can I still afford it? You've probably done that. Hey, I'm gonna buy this car. If gas prices go up, can I still afford it? You're always doing that, right? So you're always asking about the relationship between prices and how much you're gonna spend. Right? Same thing for businesses. Businesses care a great deal about the relationship between the price they charge you and what they earn. So here's a question, you probably all think that. You guys think firms can just raise prices and make profits, right? And I hear every time gas prices go up, Exxon charged more, they're gouging me, god damn it. Or in a hurricane, oh, this company's charging more for wood, and that they're gouging me, god damn it. If companies could charge more money and make more profits, I have a question for you. How come when you wake up tomorrow, everything you buy now isn't a penny more expensive? I'm not kidding. If you really have a belief that firms get to charge higher prices, why is this coffee not 5 cents more tomorrow? And then why is it U of R dropping? I know you guys say they do. Why don't they drop all your financial aid by $500 tomorrow? And the fact is they don't. And you don't have an explanation for why. Because you're just saying people are greedy. And that just wins arguments.
I have an explanation for why.
So you want to ask, and it's the same question, is if uniformly raising prices was good for them, they probably would do it. So there must be something that's stopping everyone all the time from raising prices. And the fact of the matter is I want you to remember, Two things happen when prices change. Remember early in the semester I lay on the floor, oh, oil prices go up, I guess I have to pay it. No! When prices change, yes, some people pay those prices, but some people choose to either enter markets or leave markets, and most of us forget that. So when you think about elasticity, you have a keen understanding that when prices change, you get to pay attention to two things. And when the price of something goes up, what do you know happens? The quantity falls. So whether it makes sense to raise prices depends on whether you think your customers are going to run away. And for some places, like Sierra Nevada Celebration, they could probably raise prices more and still sell all their beer because we're all addicted to it. But they don't want to seem like they're exploiting us, so they still nonetheless don't want to take advantage of it because I drink the rest of their stuff. And for some other places, when you have a lot of options, right, they raise your price, you just run away. What if pencil prices quadruple? Use your iPad. You know, you buy crayons, you buy pens. So this is how you can see it from the curve. Suppose we start right here. You're a firm, and this is U of R. They have a 10,000 student enrollment. They charge $50,000 a year. What are my total revenues right now? My total revenues are 50 times 10, $500. Suppose U of R has no cost of doing business, so that it doesn't have to worry about adding costs if it sells more, and it doesn't save costs if it sells less. Imagine it's asking, should I put someone in the seat? Well, this is the math they do. Should I raise my tuition to $80,000? Most people who make economic mistakes think that all of you are going to end up paying $80,000, so the U of R should do it and will do it. But that's not right. Some of you run away. And so what U of R has to understand is, okay, yeah, if I charge $80,000, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose some people. These are my new total revenues. So yeah, I'll charge 80, but I'm only going to have 4 customers. So what's going to happen to my revenues? I'm gonna be poor. Yeah, I get to charge more, but I have fewer people to charge. And that's the essence of all business. Businesses are always trying to partition their customers into those that will run away versus those that won't. Where does this 180 come from? Well, think about it. Everyone sees this part. For the 4 kids that don't run away, for the 4 of you that tell you, I love U of R. My dad went here, I'll never leave. I love it, it's great. I play football, blah, 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 blah. Right? Well, look, they're earning $30 more on those 4 customers, not $30 more on those 10, so they're only getting 120 back. Right? So they're comparing that with what they lose, and they're actually losing some customers, right? They're losing these guys, loss and gain. And, you lose these 6 customers, what happens? I'm going to lose, times 6, I'm going to lose $50. And so I lose 300, and that's how you get your money. So for fun, what you should do is see what happens if they lower their prices. If raising their prices from there lowers revenues, why don't they lower prices? And that's really, really important. When we get to 207, we'll put that together with supply curves. So guys, there was a lot more to say about all this, but at least I got through it. Over the weekend, I'm going to give you an announcement today. I'm going to give you my supply notes. I want you to read them. All right, and I'm going to do rationing and supply and demand.